What's up guys, Lifting here. So I'm sitting here with one of my old schoolmates who by accident all of a sudden discovered my Twitch channel and my YouTube channel, and after some time, well quite a lot of time, he finally recognized that it was me that he knew back from school. And you know, one thing led to another. He's now sitting here in my apartment. He has no paint on. We're about to... he's sitting here in my apartment, and we thought it would be fun to show off some of the builds he has been playing in the past league and have had some success with. So check it out. Alright, Vicarian, so for the first build we have here, what are we playing?
Okay, so for this first build, the idea was that this new skill came out, blight, so the idea was how much damage can we do with blight. So for this build we went Occultist to get some good chaos damage. We get the bloom effect for massive chaos explosions, and since we're Occultist we also go CI. So here, let's see how much damage we can actually deal with blight in this setup.
Cool. How much or what type of content have you been able to deal with so far?
Yeah, so far we started out in the lower tiers, of course, which went really seamless. When we reach the red maps, it starts to slow down a little bit, especially on bosses and the rare mobs. If you have, for example, Enfeeble or more Monster Life or something like this, then you start to feel that it slows down a little bit. You have to stay a bit longer to kill the mobs. But other than that, pack clearing is really fast, and it feels quite good until then.
What would you say the pros and cons of the build are?
So the pros, of course, since we're doing chaos damage, we have no worries about reflect, we have no worries about resist. We can just clear without... most map mods are just good to go, more or less at least. It's a easy pack to pack clear. We just dot, whirl to the next pack, dot again. There's a bit of a learning curve to know how long you need to stay at each pack in order to make sure you have enough chaos damage on them for them to die. But other than that, it's really great. Then it has some really nice initial defense. Since we're doing Tri-Curse setup, we have Temp Chains and Feeble running in our Heretic's Veil. And then the initial debuff from the blight, which slows the monsters a lot with the hinder effect of it, basically makes it so any mob you start dotting stands completely still when you start out. So it's really defensive in that way, but it also lacks a bit in defensibility when it comes to actually taking damage, since the only way we regen the energy shield is to walk away, let the energy shield recharge, and then come back into the fight. Since we have no leech, we have nothing like that to help us survive.
So what about the cost of the builds?
So here we have a bit of a problem, since it's a quite expensive build. We're dealing with around 10 Exalted, since we're running Heretic's Veil. We're running some really expensive items. So the cost per damage we're dealing right now is not great compared to other builds that are available right now. So currently it's not really that great, but it's considering the cost. But yeah.
Alright, cool. Anything you want to mention before we move on to the next build?
Yeah, so as you saw in the video, it's not exactly a complete build yet. It's still a work in progress. So as you saw, we have no Vaal Haste, we have no Vaal Discipline yet, which would help greatly with the survivability in most cases, and the clear speed, since the Vaal Haste allows us to stack the dot faster and also whirl a lot faster. So yeah, it's still a progress, and the skill is also new, and they already mentioned that they might balance it a bit more. So
yeah, by increasing the damage, right?
Exactly, or for example, making the debuff even stronger or something. We don't know yet. So it has potential to be really strong at least.
All right, cool. Alright, so for the next build, what are we playing here and what's the idea behind it?
Okay, so the idea here was I wanted to do a Slayer with a spell, since we get a lot of AoE from the Slayer, so spells are really interesting with the Slayer. And this was just at the beginning of the league where Blade Vortex got buffed or nerfed, however you want to look at it. It went to 20 stacks instead of the 50. So the idea here was, okay, let's try and do a Blade Vortex with Slayer, which tries to stack as much chaos damage as possible. And while keeping it really, really budget. That was kind of the idea here.
So what did you want to do with it? What type of content did you want to farm with it?
Yeah, okay, so my main idea here was I wanted to do a budget, as I mentioned, lab farmer basically. So how much does it require to actually farm overlap reliably on as little currency as possible? But also without sacrificing maps, as you want to get to the lab in the beginning of the league. So something that can also farm maps reliably all the way to end tier. So that was kind of the idea here. And so I've been able to do all the way up to tier 15 with no issues. There's a few map mods you can't do, and it has a bit low HP, so you're a bit squishy in some situations from some of the hard-hitting bosses. But I did manage to do, for example, Hydra Deathless, despite it being poison immune, which is part of the build.
Cool. What would you say the pros and cons of this build is?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's really, really budget, and the way it's budget is we're using 2 Obliteration ones, or we can use an Obliteration one plus the Broken Faith Shield. And it uses a Cherubim's Maleficence in the beginning of the league for chest armor, which helps us get a lot of leech.
Yeah.
So that's all that's really needed to get started running
very
the
cheap
lab.
items.
Exactly. We're talking about less than 20 chaos here to actually get some really, really good starting items in labs. And of course, you need some good rares to cap your assist. But other than that, it's really cheap to get started.
Yeah.
And you can add it on the roomies for a little bit earlier survival in the labs to make sure you don't get hit all the time, because it is a bit low on HP. So you do need some good dodge or something.
Yeah.
And then later on, we go for late game content. We go Cosprey's Will, so we get free curse. We get or free extra curse from Witchfire Brew, and we get poison simply because we're cursing, and we're dealing with hexproof in all maps from the Cospreys, which basically makes us able to do pretty much all maps except more or less no leech and blood magic. Yeah, that's pretty much the only cons, and it doesn't deal well with volatiles. Since you're dealing a lot of damage, it might not seem like this does a lot of damage, but it actually does a really lot of damage. You don't really have time to notice volatiles. So when you're just running around killing everything, suddenly you're just gonna say resurrect somewhere, and then you realize, oh, there was a volatile there.
So the core benefit of this really is that you can get to farm Uber Lab and do high level map content for less than in Exalted Orb.
Exactly, and you also saw in the video you're able to run through traps. Izaro, we kill him almost instantly due to the 20% call.
Yeah,
and so and it's pretty much permanent onslaught as well. We're just running around really, really fast.
Yeah, the overleech seems very interesting when it comes to traps.
Exactly. As soon as you have some mobs before you run into the traps, you just make sure you pop your Serious Promise to get even more leech, and then as soon as you've hit one pack, you just speed through all the traps with no issue.
All right, cool. Anything you want to mention here?
So yeah, just generally the playstyle, as you imagine, it's a Blade Vortex character. It does poison and it does some explosions, so that's more or less how
that's how you play it.
It's like any other Blade Vortex, more or less.
Yeah.
But it does have a bit slow start at the beginning of the league, since we're playing a Slayer spellcaster, which means the skill gem availability is terrible.
Scaling.
And the scaling. Usually I start out with melee, basically, because that's just simpler, but it is possible to level it from the beginning with a Blade Vortex. Cool. You just have to have a lot of friends that can give you all the stuff you need.
Yeah. All right, cool. So the last build here, to me that definitely seems like the most gimmicky build of them all. What do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, so basically the idea here was, I saw some guy, a short video on YouTube, playing Vaal RF, basically just destroying everything. So I was like, I want to do that. So I basically started to look at what build possibilities do we have here. Of course, the Elementalist back then seemed like a really good choice, still is the choice I would choose for this. So we're playing an Elementalist that uses Vaal RF and Flame Blast, more or less. Yeah,
and just for anyone out there, it's Vaal Righteous Fire, in case
exactly.
In case you don't know. But so what's the strengths of this type of build?
So the strength is it pretty much destroys everything that's on your entire screen instantly, as well as bosses. So it can pretty much one-shot any content in the game, more or less, as long as you ignite.
As long as you ignite.
Exactly. Because when you don't ignite, it does feel a bit weaker. It still can clear most stuff simply because of the amount of damage. So the way it works, for those that don't know, Vaal RF basically takes your entire life pool or energy shield pool and uses that to deal damage to everything around you. Which means here we're using all our energy shield, which is basically around 10.5k, deal that amount of damage to all surrounding mobs, plus modifiers of course, and then lose all your energy shield. And then we use instant leech to get it all back from Vaal Pact.
So you barely see the drop.
Exactly. Usually you just notice like how does it deal that much damage just from pressing a button, and it's basically because all the energy shield disappears, which is also the con of the build, because you're likely to die at some point due to some fuck up you're gonna do.
But you actually played it in hardcore, didn't you?
I played it in hardcore until level 89 so far. Almost died twice simply because of these fuck ups. As like you run into, for example, a divine shrine. You don't notice it's a divine shrine. You pop your Vaal RF. You're standing there on 1 HP, surrounded by monsters, and screaming your lungs out. So you have to literally have your fingers on the F or your logout button almost all the time, in hardcore at least. But so far it's worked great. Like, you need to be careful, but it has a little build up at the beginning of the map. But once you get it started in the map, it just clears almost instantly.
So what's the cost of this?
So the cost right now, as we're dealing with CI, we scale it through having a lot of energy shields. So the better energy shield you have, the more damage you're going to do. But some of the items at the beginning of the league would probably be around 3x, especially due to you want a high energy shield, Vaal Regalia, for example. So yeah, there's a little bit of cost especially in the beginning of the league. But in the end of the league, it's really cheap actually, because everyone's got some good ES gear stacked up or something like that.
And then you do flame blast strikes to charge up the The Righteous Fire.
Exactly. The playstyle, more or less, you start the map, you have basically 3 Vaal RFs you're going to charge up all the time. You have 2 big AoEs, and then you have a single conk effect version of it to basically kill bosses with.
Okay.
So yeah, in the early map, you just flame blast until you have all the charges you need. Of course, you're also running Sacrificial Harvest to get more Vaal Souls. And then you basically just stack them up. You go to the next pack when you have it stacked up, and you just unload your entire Energy Shield on them, which basically kills everything on the screen.
Awesome. Well, Vicarian, thank you for coming over and showcasing your builds here. You'll leave some info as to the builds in the description of the video, right?
Yep, exactly. And some alternative versions of some of them as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.